Thank you everybody for joining today's webinar. My name is Brent Hoover. I work here for the Aiken area SBDC. I'm also a professor here at the School of Business for USC Aiken. And my colleague, Earl Gregorich, is also joining me as well. Earl, if you'd like to briefly introduce yourself, please do so.
Thanks, Brent. So welcome from sunny Greenville. I'm the area manager up here in Greenville, South Carolina, and have worked on QuickBooks for many, many years, several different businesses. So happy to join. Thanks, Brent.
Certainly. So as you might have guessed, today's webinar is all about QuickBooks. Now, here's the thing. This is a top-level discussion. It is going to be going particularly through QBO, as you will notice later in the material that desktop is, well, transitioning away, as we shall say. Now, what is the agenda going to look like for today? Let us see. So, of course, we are SBDC, so naturally we have to educate you on who we are and what we can offer, just from a general standpoint, but also from an expert standpoint. Then we will get into today's discussion relating into introduction to QuickBooks Online. So number one, we're going to look at the different platform options. Yes, there are several subscription models that you can choose from. We're going to talk about best practices regarding setup. That is a critical component. Then we're going to talk about the features of value that it can deliver. And lastly, we will review. Now, as Carolyn mentioned, please, as we go through this, type your questions into the chat box. At the end of today's discussion, we will answer said questions to the best of our ability. And if you would like a copy of this presentation, please fill out those surveys. That information is crucial to helping us stick around as a service to the public. So speaking of which, we're SBDC. No, we're not the SBA, but we are the Small Business Development Center. So what do? We offer no cost and confidential counseling one-on-one. We are paid employees. We have to have professional development each year. We come from a plethora of industries with a wide variety of skill sets that we can offer to you as the client. All we ask is you sign up via Neosera. We'll get you scheduled in for an initial consult, figure out what you need, and we'll go from there. As long as you're a for-profit business that's going to be operating here in South Carolina, we can help you. We can't give tax advice, we can't give legal advice, but we can connect you with said professionals. Now, speaking of those connections, that's what you see on the second point here, the access to valuable resources. Now, we here at Aiken and quite other few centers have their own resource guides. So you can see who are the local CPAs, the bankers, attorneys, etc. But it doesn't just end there. We also pay for subscriptions to valuable information such as ProfitSense, Vertical IQ, and iBiz World, just to name a few. That information can be crucial when developing a business plan, strategic analysis for growth, etc. And once again, they're available to the client at no charge. And lastly, as you might imagine, hence why we're doing today, is the training workshops, the education component. Yes, we go out into the public, inform them about what we can do, what we can offer, and of course, how we're connected through the community. And as you might imagine, if you were on today's webinar, you can also look on our website, and most likely you're on our email list as well, so you can get up to dates on all the webinars and/or live events that will be coming in the future. So once again, top level about who we are and what we can do. Now, we do have some specialty programs. The first one is certainly ironic, considering Earl and I both sit on said program. Earl spearheads the cybersecurity assistance program. Okay, you may be hearing some rumors coming down, I wouldn't say rumors necessarily, but rumblings perhaps, that things such as CMMC or cybersecurity maturity model certification may be on its way. You may have heard of North Star. You may have just been, well, cognizant of the fact that becoming a soft target is much easier. Your business is vulnerable from a cyber standpoint. After COVID, things have increased. Therefore, we offer some assistance in this manner. Basically meaning we educate you on cyber hygiene. It doesn't need to be a rocket science or you have a degree in cybersecurity in order to better protect yourself, and it's not going to break the budget either. Not to mention, too, we have exporting assistance, whether that's from Ben Smith, Beth Smith, Tom Loria, etc. We have several consultants who are actually certified in exporting and have a plethora of years of experience to help you better with that if you so choose. Not to mention, too, we have specialists in government contracting that can help you with socioeconomic certifications, also preparing requests for proposals, etc. And last but not least, we have product commercialization. Kevin Weir, who's on our team, is highly valuable in that regard. If you're looking to develop, say, a product, get funding for it, patent it, or any other version of intellectual property, that is his area of expertise. So we have a lot of things to offer. But once again, we're just trying to always show that it is available if you so choose. Now, let's actually get around to QuickBooks. Let's start with the most obvious thing here. If I had to come up with one statement, and I think Earl can agree with this, with QuickBooks, here's the thing. Let it work for you and not against you. All right. Now, Earl and I are both certified QuickBooks Pro advisors, and so is my intern on the call, Andrew Holmes, as well. Now, please understand, you need to be coordinating with your CPA throughout this process. All right. But once again, I need to stress, it can work for you or it can work against you. But let's start with the basic two things. You heard of QuickBooks Desktop. It's been around forever. You heard about QuickBooks Online. It's more new. Here's the thing. If you look on the website for Intuit, you're trying to figure out which one should I go with. Well, here's the thing. Desktop is slowly getting migrated out for this variety. If you go to the current website of Intuit today, you will notice when you go click QuickBooks Desktop, it will show you only one variation of that currently through their platform, and it's an annual subscription for QuickBooks Desktop Enterprise, which it runs over $2,000 for an annual subscription. That may not be in your budget, and you may not need up to 40 users attached to that. Therefore, you will notice for this variety that QuickBooks Online is becoming the new trend. CPAs like it. Why? In essence, it's ubiquitous. You can access it from anywhere. It's rather user-friendly. Now, you may argue that some other programs out there, such as free versions, may have more of a better interface for a business. But essentially, this is what you're looking at from the start. In essence, whether you like it or not, QuickBooks Online is the future of QB. Therefore, it's an inevitability at this point. Now, the good news is, if you are currently operating on desktop and you're worried, oh gosh, I'm stuck with this, how am I going to do this? The nice thing is you can easily migrate over from desktop to online. There's a few things you're going to have to manually adjust. And if you go through the Pro Advisor training offered by Intuit, you'll see that, yes, there is a little bit of prep work to ensure that. But once again, your information can be transferred over to the online capacity. Now, I mentioned there's some free versions out there because some people are like, look, I don't know if I want QuickBooks or not. At the most basic form, they offer a 30-day free trial and the test drive link that I'm going to show through this webinar. You're going to be able to access said test drive link, and it gives you a sample company, which we're going to demo, and you can see all the features that are available for that. Essentially, it acts as a version of QuickBooks Plus, not necessarily QuickBooks Advanced, because there is one feature missing out of there, and it's new that's been offered on the highest version of this platform. But we have clients, of course, that use a mixture of, say, like Wave, because they like to do the free invoicing and free accounting. Okay. We have clients that work on Excel. I put together a ledger template that essentially acts as QuickBooks for those that don't want to pay for it, but it's very limited. At the end of the day, you're probably going to eventually need something of this capacity in order to grow your business and properly track what's going on with this. All right. We also see too a mixture of people that want to stick with just their point of sale systems. They're like, hey, I get granular data on exactly what I'm earning. Well, that doesn't link in expenses, because remember, at the end of the day, business is about one thing. It's looking at profitability. And profitability is all about essentially how much you're spending. So having the ability to link in your revenue and your expenses together in real time certainly is of great benefit. Surprisingly, quite a few companies don't have that real-time access to said knowledge, and it actually can hurt them and be to their detriment. Okay. But one of those things, if you're going to go with this and figure out what should be the best option, please, I stress this again, coordinate with your CPA. We are Pro Advisor certified, but we are not CPAs. Therefore, the accountant's going to be working with you hand in hand throughout the duration of your business life. Therefore, you want to ensure that they're on board with what you're doing from a record keeping standpoint. Now, with that said, what do you need? Well, because this is really going to determine which version of the platform that you will utilize. If you're in need of inventory, I will have to tell you, if you want to operate QuickBooks to the best of your ability, unless you're going to pay for a third-party software that's linked in via an app, QuickBooks Plus is going to be your best bet, because you'll notice as the next slide that Simple Start and Essentials are not going to work for you in that capacity. Now, if you need assistance with payroll, there's actually another linkage that goes into this. So there's QBO, meaning QuickBooks Online, but also you have QuickBooks Payroll, which can be bundled in together. And speaking of a bundle, right now, I figured I'd let you know on Intuit's website, there's a July 4th sale. You can get QuickBooks and or QuickBooks with Payroll for a bundle at 70% off for the first 3 months. So that's across the board. So I figured I'd throw it out there if you're looking for a discount. Now, Earl has also provided me with an ongoing discount through, in this case, our link with the SBDC. If I'm not mistaken, it gives you 30% off. Sometimes I've seen the site go 50% through Intuit. You want to read the fine print to see if you can or cannot use discounts together in conjunction with each other, but we figured we'd let you know about it nonetheless. If you're in the need of estimating and progress invoicing, you're dealing with clients on different projects, you want to scale in a project such as an architect, okay? You need to consider that with your QuickBooks platforms, and not to mention tracking time. Now, I know Earl's probably going to mention some stuff on this in terms of the integration with the T-sheets involving QuickBooks Time. And yes, the demo that we're going to debut allows you to run through an analysis of QuickBooks Time as well. It takes about 5 minutes to load and auto-generate, but it allows you to see all the features available with that as well. Earl, would you like to add anything on the slide?
Yeah, actually on the integration point, the scenario that you need to consider as well is look at the software packages that you currently have in place. Brent mentioned point of sale systems, using Excel, some of the other packages that might be unique to your business, especially if you have a industry specific software package that you use for your business. It's really important that it integrates smoothly with QuickBooks if you want to get correct and timely information. Probably one of the biggest areas that we see trip ups on is the inventory side. You've got a point of sale system working, you've got an e-commerce cart working, you've got QuickBooks, and lo and behold, you look up an item and you got 3 different inventory counts for the very same item. So you will have to work through, and frankly, you may have to rig the system in some cases when it comes to inventory, because QuickBooks does not play friendly in the sandbox with everybody on all facets of business. So just make sure you spend some time thinking about, what is software that you have in place that you absolutely must keep running, and how well will it integrate with QuickBooks?
Certainly. Those are great points, Earl, and they're actually going to tie into what we talk about when we establish the setup, particularly with apps. Now, I mentioned their different platform options, right? So here they are. Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, and Advanced. And this was when they had a 50% discount. Now, that's gone away right now until July 7th. Once again, they're offering 70% discount on the first 3 months. I think this particular discount they had back in the day was running for 1 year. So they changed these up. Okay. What doesn't change usually are the features involved within each of these 4 platforms. Now, as you can see, Plus is the most popular. One of those things being the inventory component. You'll notice that's actually excluded out of Essentials and Simple Start. Not to mention, too, you can track the profitability of each project. All right. With Simple Start, here's a nice thing. You can start at said point, start at Simple Start, and transition up into a higher version, because you may find in this case, number one, you can only connect in one sales channel. And not to mention, too, you can't have multiple users. That's something particularly when we start talking about Ask My Accountant features and want to have multiple people involved, that could be a limitation in said manner. Not to mention, too, you want bill management, entering time, you're looking at Essentials as well. Now, one of the unique features that's coming with Advanced, and I will say this, in most of my clients, I only see usually up to Plus. I don't see many people go to the Advanced option. Number one, the price tag is higher, and you can see usually on this case. But there's the last new bullet point that came down there, and that's data sync with Excel, aka the spreadsheet sync, which if I have time, I will debut this through Excel. It's something new that's been integrated within Advanced. Essentially, for a while, Advanced was operating on some form of business analytics, and they realized they could tie into Excel. One of the limitations was if we wanted to do data analysis, I had to take everything, export it out, either in Excel format, CSV, etc., bring it into the Excel platform and mess around with it. Well, here's the nice thing now with Spreadsheet Sync, you can do that in real time. Not to mention you can batch edit in real time and have that uploaded, because it actually requires you to log in. It's going to create a separate tab in Excel for that manner. The trick is whether or not you're willing to pay for the additional price tag on this, okay? But as you can see through Intuit, most popular is the Plus option, mainly because what you see is out of the inventory and the project profitability, okay? Once again, promotional codes, they do change. We have ours. Intuit's got theirs currently. You never know what's going to be currently active, so stay on the lookout for that, all right? Now, in regards to other elements for this, It ties back into whether or not you want to bundle. Because right now, currently, they're saying, hey, if you want to have payroll, meaning you are managing W-2 employees and you want to properly withhold federal and state income, you want to be able to actually withhold FICA, etc., maybe deal with 401ks. The list goes on when you're going into payroll. Now, there are several options out of the payroll. You can go for the core, you can go for the premium, and you can go for the elite. If you're looking to do payroll on your own and with no CPA guidance, elite has a strong selling point coming out of there. Essentially, they give you tax liability protection up to $25,000 in case something goes awry and you get stuck with a bill saying, hey, you improperly did the taxes for said employee or multiple employees for that matter. Okay. But it can be integrated in the same way. So while they're technically two different platforms, they are put together essentially as one function if you so choose. But once again, it's about what's right for you. Earl, would you have any other thoughts on the 4 different platforms?
Yeah, I would just agree that Essentials and Plus, those are usually the 2 most popular. I would say if you're a consulting type of a business, Essentials is probably sufficient for what you're doing. If you want to incorporate inventory and the like, if you're a product-based business, then Plus might be the next upgrade for you. Also keep in mind that while it lists all of these things that it will do, just think long and hard about how many of them you're actually going to use. Most small businesses will spend the bulk of their time in QuickBooks on literally a half a dozen transaction types and never really touch on some of these deeper items. Now, if you're interfacing with a CPA or maybe another vendor or another program, some of these capabilities may be needed to do that. But don't buy into something because it looks like you're getting all the bells and whistles. I mean, you got a business to run. You're probably not gonna have time to be tracking down what this little doohickey will do and so on. So just focus on what you need and don't confuse yourself with all the options.
Good advice, Earl. Good advice. Now, if you figured out which platform you're going to go with, the next step actually is to get this thing set up. All right, please do this correctly up front. It's going to make your life so much easier as you go forward with the business, right? Because at the end of the day, you want QuickBooks to be able to have a solid structure, and then you can mainly focus on running your day-to-day business. Now, you can't just set up QuickBooks, let it automatically go, and think everything's going to be perfectly fine. No, on an off chance, maybe that might happen. Realistically, yes, you're going to want to ensure that things are properly matched. So when you're going into the banking capacity, make sure the rules are actually properly working. But more importantly, too, reconciliation is always something a business must face to ensure that the ledger is actually working as intended. Now, with the flow of automation, right, we have the quotations all in because it's easier to have that mindset up front, okay? Some people are like, I just want to have for the bare basics. It's like, look, if you're probably going to use this to the best benefit, get this up front. Therefore, QuickBooks operates on one thing to begin with as the foundation. It's the COA, the chart of accounts. That's why it is the first graphic up here on the smart art. For the chart of accounts, it's going to include 2 different varieties, right? It's going to be pulling from things on your income statement, literally such as its income, cost of goods sold, the different expense categories, and it's pulling from elements off of the balance sheet as well. So it's not just strictly the balance sheet, okay? It's pulling from both, but it's linking in and saying what's going on with any money flow that's going through the company, all right? So once again, now when you set up QuickBooks, it's gonna ask you to be able to change what's going on with your industry, okay? While it's a quasi version of the NAICS code, for lack of a better term, it is helping you figure out what might be your default chart of accounts. Now, here's the thing. You need to go in there and edit that and customize it to your needs. Hence the integration with your CPA being so crucial. Now, here's the nice thing. With QuickBooks Online now, they actually have offered a free setup guide as part of any platform. Their website states that it goes from simple start all the way up to advanced. Now, if you want to take advantage of that, great. If you want to have your CPA and yourself sit down for an hour or two and make sure the chart of accounts and everything that's subsequent on this slide is also established, that is also great as well. But you want to ensure the chart of accounts are right. Most platforms are going to have up to about 250 accounts, okay? You get into advanced, I think you're able to go past that number. Most businesses are probably going to fall under that capacity. You can set up new accounts as you see fit for that variety. Okay, so there's going to be things such as also from the balance sheet. It's going to be looking at your savings account, maybe your checking account. Okay, looking essentially at the cash and cash equivalent, right? It's also looking at accounts receivable, if you have any, right? Also your other current assets, your inventory, assuming you're using probably in that case, like with a Plus platform. All of these are going to be established, but what you need to do is determine based on the default that come in, are they sufficient? See, like with me as a pro advisor, we actually have access into a version of QuickBooks in real time. Essentially, mine is the version of advanced. And I actually looked at it by default and see what it thrown in there. It only threw in 32 different accounts in the COA. And it was just the bare basics. Other current assets, they had one for uncategorized income, uncategorized expenses, some of the things you might see on the Schedule C. But once again, it was very bare basic. So therefore, you need to figure out, once again, which chart of accounts should be applicable to you. And I stress that, coordinate with the CPA. That's one of those things we can give guidance on that. But honestly, Earl and I would prefer that as tax professional actually help you establish the chart of accounts to your liking. All right. And also to what's going to be the best for you as you go through with tax planning each year. Now, when you got your chart of accounts established, you have them as you see fit. Great. Okay, let's talk about the connections. So usually
Brent,
most businesses are going to connect in.
Brent,
Oh yeah, Earl, please chime in.
before you jump into connections there, one
Certainly.
thing to note is for those of you who are doing a migration from desktop to QBO, QuickBooks Online, this might be a really good opportunity for you to go back and reassess what accounts have cropped up on you.
Yep.
If you've been using desktop over the years, you have probably created some accounts within your chart of accounts that maybe you don't want to carry forward. And you might have the opportunity to consolidate some chart of accounts maybe that have come into the picture that you've gotten some transactions that maybe you misclassified, which caused the creation of a chart of accounts that you no longer need, and so on. So take the opportunity, if you're in that migration phase, to reassess all of the chart of accounts and make sure you have what you need to go forward.
Absolutely. And Earl's going to be able to provide some additional input on the connection side. So with the chart of accounts established, with QBO, you may say, what connections do I need? Probably it's going to be this: banking, it's going to be savings checking, and also 2 credit cards. Those can all be integrated through connections. Okay. Now the trick is, I've seen clients go 2 different ways on this. Some of them are very happy to have connections, particularly with their bank account. A lot of the banks are transitioning to OAuth or Open Auth. Okay, it's essentially a form of authorization because it's trying to make it where you have easier access when importing the past transactions, right? If they're through the OAuth, if I'm not mistaken, they can go past the 90-day period. Now, some of the banks still have the option. You can download the CSV file from the past, I think like in some cases 2 years, and you have them. So therefore, the bank balances are actually up to date within QuickBooks, because that's one of those things. If you have opening balances, you want to ensure those are right from the beginning. And that applies also to the chart of accounts. Okay. Also too, if you're, like Earl mentioned, if you're migrating over from desktops to QBO. But some clients have argued, well, do I necessarily need that? Some are a little bit worried about it because anything with cyber has a potential, liability to be hacked on that case. Some people are making sure they want the full-time, let's say, automation for having accurate information in real time. You'll notice within the QuickBooks test drive, it'll actually show you like moments ago it's been updated. But I see clients really going either way on this case. Earl, what has been your experience on the connection side?
The thing is, QuickBooks Online really is meant to be connected. If you want to run it unconnected to your banks, it actually makes it difficult because the flows, the menu, the navigation, the menu systems as you go through sending bills or writing checks or whatever it is that you're doing, it's set up such that it's connected to a bank account. So if you decide not to do that, you're going to have to relearn how to work QuickBooks Online. So basically what you are reduced to doing is always operating out of your chart of accounts. You're not going to really be able to follow a lot of the visual cues that QBO gives you through the transactions. You're just going to go right straight to your chart of accounts. You're going to double click the account. You're going to do a line item entry. So it's more like operating from your checkbook register. So while visually you're not going to get all the pretty things that QBO offers to guide you through it, but you can still operate it and do it. You just have to maybe have a little bit more of an accounting mindset to do it.
Yep.
But yeah, most of my clients will take the connections. It's fairly easy to do. There is that cybersecurity risk, as Brent mentioned, but you're going to have that regardless. I mean, just the fact that you're keeping your records on your home system, your business system, it's a target anyway. So I wouldn't use that as my sole deciding factor as to whether or not I wanted to use connections.
Indeed. Now, once you've gone through the chart of accounts, the connections, then comes into the last element, and Earl's briefly indirectly touched on that, and that's linking in with the apps. So most likely you have other pieces of software that you want to integrate, or as Earl said, play nice with QuickBooks. Now, understand a lot of these apps are coming in from the different companies, and you can see how they are rated. So some of these are, of course, famous, like, hey, we need to link in with Square, Clover. If you want to link in with PayPal, the list goes on. You can also see how people have rated said apps to ensure that they are going to work as intended. I've had one client have an extremely smooth process with the apps and LinkedIn. It was fine. I've also had a case where one of the apps overstated the income being brought in through their point of sale system twice. So essentially it was double stating it, and we tried to deep dive to figure out what was going on. Eventually we just had to break the connection, start over from scratch on that case, and then thankfully it was fixed. But sometimes you'll notice with these third-party apps that it can be a bit of hit or miss. So once again, to stress, test them out routinely. Make sure they're up to date, they're working properly, and then it's going to be probably much more smooth sailing than, say, if you don't. But you're going to be able to also search any of the apps available through it. And that's when we do the test drive. We can actually search and see which are the most popular. It'll show you, of course, if you haven't logged in, what the pricing would be for some of them in that capacity. But once again, to show you the options here, we want to start with the chart of accounts. We want to work our way through connections. And I apologize. I realized my mouse took us way ahead of what we intended, and finally go with the apps. Now, assuming you've got this automated process in place, understand still at the end of the day, I'm sure many of you may dread going back to your accounting days, but the identity equation of the accounting or GAAP is always going to remain true. Assets equals liabilities plus equity. The nice thing about this here is that at the end of the day, you have a balance sheet that's put together through QuickBooks. A lot of times businesses probably won't even have a balance sheet prepared for that manner unless they're legally required to, such as being an S Corp, filing with your 1120S or a partnership, where they actually require that, I believe, on the Schedule L for that variety within said tax return. Okay. But you got one put together here, but understand underneath its workings, it's functioning the same way. So if you feel like you don't have as strong as an accounting background, this is why coordinating with your CPA is important, because if you need to ever make journal entries to actually adjust and correct something that is inaccurate on those cases, unless you know your debits and credits very well, you may be better off giving that to a CPA. Because you'll notice when we talk about the ability to export things out of there, you can actually export the entire ledger. And it can be sometimes madness in seeing not only every transaction, but also to the journal entries involved, etc. You may be better off actually pulling the profit and loss detail, which is a little bit more itemized and business friendly. And therefore it's getting more about the information that is at your hand. But I stress this once again, because reconciliation is a critical component when dealing with any form of business records. Earl and I actually recently talked about that in preparation for this. We have some clients that are reconciling on a weekly basis. We have some that are a little bit more low key and they're not requiring it. They don't have high daily volume of transactions, so they're more on a monthly analysis. But you want to be staying up to date on what's going on within this information, because the prior slide is about getting this to have a smooth flow. And once again, that doesn't always mean the information is always going to be accurate for this case.
Yeah, Brent, when you opened up, you said you can use QuickBooks and use it for you, or you can use it against you. If you want to make QuickBooks work against you, don't reconcile very often, because what happens is this stuff piles up, and memory it fades away, right? And you're looking at a transaction that you can't recall where it came from or who it was for, or if the amount's correct. The time and the agony spent on that kind of stuff will cause you to stay away from QuickBooks, which compounds the problem. And next thing you know, it's working against you, not for you.
Absolutely. Now, one of the nice things, since we were mentioning accounting, right, is that you have two options available in real time: cash basis accounting and accrual. I always ask my students whether they like accrual basis accounting or not, and usually there's quite a few groans that go along with it. In reality, most businesses probably are going to operate off of cash basis accounting. A lot of that ties into revenue recognition, when's actually income earned, when's an expense actually incurred based on the work that's been done on this case. The nice thing with QuickBooks is with the reports, you can detail, go back and forth between cash and accrual within the company settings. So you go into the tools for the settings and you actually pull up your company information. It allows you by default to figure out, is your company operating off of cash or accrual basis accounting? But once again, within the reports, it's nice to have that information within real-time knowledge. But at its fundamental components, QuickBooks is operating off of these four elements. Now, we've already talked about the big one, the accounts, right? Things from both the income statement and the balance sheet. But there are other elements that we do need to discuss. The fourth one, items, isn't so much a direct thing, is more of an indirect. You may not even notice it going on in the background, but you will notice the customer/jobs and the vendors. Why? Because each one of them is going to have their own components, right? With the vendors, they're going to show up under the expense center, and the customers and jobs are going to show up under the sales. Okay. Why? Because you have the two things going in. You got money coming in, you got money going out for those varieties. Now, with the items, they could be things that you don't necessarily notice, such as set up by per the hour, by paying by per the project, etc. These items show up in the background of the system. They could be just things on line items on your invoices, but they are still critical components of working within QuickBooks. Okay. But understand, at its basic, QuickBooks is going through these four things. Now, you may not have jobs. It really will depend on what your business is doing, but you will have customers, you will have vendors. I wouldn't necessarily call QuickBooks a really great CRM or customer relations management system, but in its most rudimentary form, it does, because when you add a new customer, when you add a new vendor, you actually have quite a few options to include on those. So in essence, it is functioning as a database on both of those two components, on the revenue side and the expenses. And that's one of those things where we talked about the integration migrating from desktop to online. You also can migrate from Excel into QBO. And one of those things that I include in my ledger template is I set up the fields to match up verbatim. Therefore, if someone ever wants to import say their customer database or their vendor database, it's going to match up the fields perfectly and make the import much more smooth process is going along. But once again, to stress, QuickBooks is going on these four components. Earl, do you want to add any input on these?
Yeah, I would again go back to the opportunity when you're migrating.
Yeah.
Is some of my clients who don't carry a huge list of vendors or a huge list of customers, I actually suggest that they might migrate the data, but add in their customers and their vendors as they need them. That will help you clean up that area. Same goes with your items. If you've been operating on the platform for a long time, you may find out that you've got 3 different instances of the same item. And when you migrate that, you may have the opportunity there to go ahead and consolidate that into one. The cleaner you keep your databases, the easier it is going to be for you to navigate through this and keep good track of what you're doing. So every opportunity you get to consolidate or narrow down the various data points, do that.
Certainly. Now, this really does tie in well because we mentioned automation. We talked about the components. If you pull up most QuickBooks platforms, the user interface can vary, particularly if you're looking at accountant view versus business view. But I like this one based off of the test drive link. It shows the automation of the flow of workspace. All right. Now, I included a smart art graphic over here on the right, which is tying in relations to the customers, because at the end of the day, most of the things you're going to be spending time on, as Earl's basically alluded to throughout this presentation, is focusing on the customers. Now, jobs, once again, may not be applicable. I mean, once again, if you're selling products only and no services, you're not going to have jobs, you're not going to have estimates, you're not going to have invoicing for that matter, most likely. Okay. But if you are on the service base, you need to consider as you're working through that. Now, as you'd see, of course, across the board here, I'm sorry if you ever see me go, I got two screens going through this work here. You'll notice you need to make sure that you're properly going through the process where we start with the estimates first, then go to invoices, then receipts for that manner. Now, I do like the little guy down here on the bottom, talk to your accountant, because I'm sure Earl will mention it later, the Ask My Accountant feature. Because the nice thing about QuickBooks is you're worried about something going wrong with your workspace for this manner, going through the proper process, you can actually invite your CPA, and also too, you can invite a pro advisor such as myself to be able to see access, have admin access, and determine whether or not there is an error going on this manner. But you see, at the end of the day, it's pulling back and having that almost circular flow. Granted, it's not quite a circular, but a rectangle for that manner of establishing this is an ongoing process as you work through. Okay. But even some services won't necessarily have, in that case, the jobs. They'll just, if you work on one project instead, it may not be necessary for what they're doing. But still, I really stress, take some time to look at this process. There's a reason if you go through the Pro Advisor training program, they actually stress this over and over in the beginning of it because they want to make sure you understand this properly. Therefore, QuickBooks is working for you. Earl, would you like to add anything on this slide?
Yeah, these maps are actually great. I mean, even if you're not in need of all of the different steps, this can actually help you start to implement processes within your business. If you take the steps that they've got outlined here and think about how that affects your day-to-day within your business, this is a great roadmap to follow. It'll help you organize the data that needs to go into the system. So if you've been doing this kind of work where you're doing estimates and invoicing and so on, tracking jobs, you may not have performed all of these steps up to this point. Now that it's mapped out right there in front of you, this is your opportunity to maybe tweak your business a little bit, but improve your processes and find that you might be able to work through your day-to-day operations in a much more efficient manner.
Absolutely. And once again, I mean, if you don't have, in that case, the jobs because you're working on, say, one type of project, you're just going to maybe looking at the invoicing for those components. But once again, it's about your particular business model. Streamline as much as possible because we'd like you to be spending the bulk of majority of your time on actually running the business rather than necessarily the admin components. All right. Now, one of the best features in my personal opinion out of QuickBooks is the report capability, because I use this on a routine basis, assuming you've done everything right. You've reconciled, you've established your chart of accounts correctly, you make sure that your connections are actually properly working. The information that's going to be produced within these reports will also be valid. They'll be valid and reliable. And the first one out of there is the P&L. It's what I work with on a routine basis. Why? Because it's the profit and loss. If a business is looking to just identify what's going on with their financial analysis, we immediately turn to the P&L. Now, here's one of those things always probably put as a best practice. If you can, export it in Excel format, because if you export it into PDF format and you want to actually mess around with that with an Excel, I see a lot of CPAs export in PDF these days, and I'm always stressing them, hey, give me the Excel actually export, assuming that the CPA is running the books for them and the client is not actually running it themselves through their own individual QuickBooks platform. Okay, but you can do the profit and loss. You can do the profit and loss monthly, which gives me great work to build out, say, a cash flow analysis for a bank loan that's coming up month to month, or you can do the profit and loss detail. I actually use the profit and loss detail as almost a informal form of auditing. If somebody's worried about what's really going on with this one section, I'll dig into the profit and loss detail, because otherwise I just have a number there and set expense category or revenue. And I'm able to actually see the transactions that go in there, identify, oh, maybe it was improperly classified, or perhaps there's something that's just being overstated to begin with. I mentioned too, QuickBooks is operating essentially under GAAP in the background, right? Assets equals liabilities plus equity. Guess what? The balance sheet, it's right there, assuming the information is not only valid, but it's also reliable for that component. Okay. You can study your balance sheet. There's a thing called benchmarking. It's a lot of what I do with my existing business clients, because we'll export the P&L as a percentage of income. And essentially we'll take every item that shows up on the income statement and essentially divide that by the gross revenue. And therefore it'll give me a percentage. Revenue is going to be 100% of itself. We'll do the same thing with the balance sheet, but instead of dividing it by gross revenue, we'll divide it by total assets. You'll be able to see a real-time percentage. Now, still, this is why I like that new spreadsheet sync feature that's come out with this, because it'll be a little easier for me to actually work with the information put at hand. But still, these are easy reports. They're actually going to show up most likely under your favorites. You will have P&L and balance sheet, and you may have something in regards to accounts receivable automatically built under your favorites, but you can select and identify and customize these reports to your liking. You can do it for this year, you can do it for this quarter, you can look at last year, per month, you name it, it's capable of doing that. I also like the aging accounts receivable and the aging accounts payable, right? The money that our customers owe us, the money we owe our vendors for that variety. And we can see how they've aged. You know, they're current, they're going 30 to 60 days, 60 to 90 days. God, I hope it's not anything going 120 plus. Otherwise, we're probably looking at bad debt in that case. But hey, it happens. And also, too, within the dashboard, it's going to give you essentially a graphical look at, oh, this is what's overdue, or this is where you need to be collecting money from your customers, right? And speaking of customers, you can segment them and see what's going on with the income earned by, say, individual clients in that case. Because once again, too, if you ever need to do a weighted break-even analysis, if you have it broken up by different product types to see what they've been sold, assuming you've established QuickBooks to do so, you could actually use that for the percentages necessary for weighted break-even, because essentially it takes everything as a pie chart 100% and figures out of the product classifications what is selling the most. Product A selling 50%, product B selling 30%, product C is coming in with the last 20, making up 100. These are just samples of what the reports can offer. I mean, as we go through the test drive, you'll see there is a list out there. You can also do one for inventory. The inventory is a little bit more limited. You can have the inventory summary and you can have the inventory valuation with the detail. But once again, it's not really meant to be a CRM. It's not really meant to be an inventory control process system. But once again, the information's available if you so choose. Earl, would you like to add anything on the reports?
Yeah, I mean, come on, this is the fruit of your labor right here,
yes,
folks. The whole idea behind putting all that data in there is to get something out on the other end that you can actually make some decisive choices about your business. So think about it this way, you've probably been in situations where you've thought, gee, I wish I knew more about that, or gee, I wish I could answer that question that the banker just asked me, or that Brent just asked me, or Earl just asked me. And this is how you get that information. If you are running a business and you cannot tell me who your number one customer is definitively and why, profit margin, what products they're buying, what products you have are part of your 20% of your top sellers, and which vendors are performing to the best of their abilities and delivering their products on time and so on. If you can't answer those kinds of questions, you are not running the business, you are reacting to the business. So having these reports in front of you will make you much, much smarter in your daily operations. And it doesn't take a whole lot to sit down and learn what these reports can tell you. That's one thing that we do as a service at the SBDC. The other thing that this will allow you to do is, at a quick glance, literally in a very short period of time after you've got to learn this, this is also your way of making sure that all the people you have helping you are, you're keeping them honest as well. I tell people all the time that if you're doing the books right and you're monitoring the numbers properly, It's the difference between you going on that trip to the Bahamas versus your accountant going on that trip to the Bahamas. So make sure you're monitoring these reports and you're seeing what you expect to see.
Certainly. Those are great points to add on, Earl. One of the last elements I wanted to throw out there before we get into the test drive is, yes, if you ever do actually want to be able to print checks through QuickBooks, you can do so, but I really stress the second point, and that is the full email functionality. When Earl and I were discussing QuickBooks, he likes to call it the deadbeat monitor, because essentially you can see, hey, I didn't just send you an invoice. Oh, we emailed it. I CC'd myself on there. I can see when you access that. You know, the famous words, checks in the mail. Well, this gives you a little bit more progress control in determining what's going on with getting paid for that manner. So once again, if you're a little old school like me, you know, hey, you have the abilities to go still through checks on that variety, but a lot of this is being integrated online. Okay. And this is one other thing that put out there. I know Earl and I, we were talking about the 4 different options that you could have, and you're saying you're going to use all the features. One of those nice things I really love about QuickBooks Online is the receipt capture, such as if you want to keep track of records, sometimes you're like, oh gosh, you know, of course, I always recommend, you know, you have something physical in case, you know, a fire happens or something. So therefore, if you're ever in an audit, you do have the records. But you can also upload some of the receipts straight into there. Say if you bought a piece of equipment and it's automatically tagged into that case, and it's going to remain there. And therefore, if you ever needed to actually prove, you know, this was legitimate business expense or this was the amount, you have the capability of doing so right there. So for those things that are not fully automated, it also can add in quite a few tidbits of help in that manner. All right, so this is the link that you can use at any time to test drive QuickBooks. I told you can do the 30 free day trial. I'd honestly say that's great. You know, you can input information into there, but at the end of 30 days, they're going to want their money out of that, assuming you want to continue using QuickBooks. The QBO allows you to do anything you want outside of, say, spreadsheet sync within the platform. And if you screw it up, don't worry, just hit the refresh button and magically it's going to be back to what it is. So before we actually get to that link, I'll just pull out some areas that we're going to see on the following thing. The Employee Center for number one. So if you want to get a sense of maybe what's going to go on with the payroll, if you ended up deciding to purchase Core, Premium, or Elite for that matter, the Tax Center, okay? In those cases, not only are you going to be able to see what you can do for 1099 payments, but also too for sales tax. And of course, maybe your business needs to track mileage for that capacity. And yes, it's going to be tied into the current IRS mileage rate, which if I'm not mistaken is 65.5 cents for 2023 in that manner. But don't forget about the Ask My Accountant. Okay, if you're ever worried about something, you can invite your accountant. You can invite one of us as the ProAdvisor consultants, because yes, we do have a QuickBooks platform through there. And I can actually see what's going on with the company and admin and a lot of the reports. I can actually easily pull said reports right there. And you don't have to email reports to me if you're worried about it from a security standpoint. It makes it a lot easier for those manners. And not to mention, we're going to see some of the new features that come along. As I told you earlier, desktops being phased out of this. It's going to QuickBooks Online. I know that may not be to your liking or your CPA's liking necessarily, but it is the future moving forward. The spreadsheet sync is quite cool. There's one element. I need to figure out if there is just an issue with my version, or it may be that it's still in beta testing because it is so new, and that's regards to ProAdvisors being able to access the client information through spreadsheet sync. The free setup I mentioned earlier, QuickBooks will help with that. The T-sheets fully integrated, and not to mention the payroll elite. With the $25,000 tax protection liability that exists only, that exclusive to Elite, it certainly has a selling point as you go forward, because that is something a business has to consider. You know, you want to be coordinating with your CPA, but at the end of the day, the cost you have to weigh. I mean, some CPAs here may charge $250 a month to handle payroll, and you may say, well, I can maybe get a better deal based off of Elite. Right now, with Elite and going into QuickBooks Plus, I think it's still running under that $250 amount, but that doesn't say that you can ignore your CPA and say, yeah, whatever, I'm saving some bucks. You may save a few bucks now, but you may be costing yourself some money down the road if you're still not going through it and properly ensuring everything is up to speed. So I know we're running short on time, so let me pull up this with the QuickBooks tab here. Okay. Oh, looks like I signed out to the next.
While you're doing that, and I'll just make a comment that, you know, folks, if you've got employees. Payroll is one of those areas I really recommend you consider farming out. It's just, it can be time consuming at the very least. It can be confusing and sometimes a legal liability if you do it incorrectly. So find a solution that can do it at a reasonable rate and pursue that, because payroll is just something that not everybody, almost everybody I work with, it's a mystery to them. So look for those services that will be able to provide that at a reasonable rate and farm that out when you get the opportunity.
I apologize, guys. The test drive, I was trying to sign into my personal QuickBooks. I'm going to reload the QBO test drive here. Give me 1 second.
Thanks for all the questions in the chat box. I think I've been able to answer them as we go. If I've missed anybody, please repost that question. I know I had one question that I erroneously answered just to one person, but I put it back out to everybody. So you should have gotten that. But
all right, we're good to go now. All right, so when you get into QuickBooks, the test drive, it's going to ask you to prove you're not a robot. And this is what's going to pop up. The famous Craig Design and Landscaping Services for that variety. Okay, none of this is real. It's the information being put out there. But you can see what's going to show up immediately, everything you could connect in, the checking, the savings, the MasterCard, and the Visa for those varieties. But I told you about in the last slide, you got the expense center. You got also too your mileage tracking. And as I talked about, the chart of accounts for this variety. Now, in this case, right, the chart accounts are much more limited to what they're doing here. But you'll see some of them are sub-accounts. Going for installation is part of the cost of labor, okay, which in that case is part of the job expenses. You can customize these to your needs, all right? But Earl and I stress the ability of reports for that manner, okay? By default, they had 3 here for the favorites, the balance sheet, the profit and loss, and the accounts receivable aging summary, okay? With those cases, we can pull up the P&L, and here it is. In that variety, you will notice, in this company, it looks like they're doing net income of just over $1,600 for the case of 6 months. But you can customize those. I mentioned you can do cash basis. We can run that report. You want to export it, it's right there, capable of exporting to Excel for those manners. You wanted to look at like the vendors we talked about. Here they are, the sample companies, but also too, they're telling us, you got nearly $1,000 overdue coming in these cases, but what have you paid? What's going on with your current purchase order? At least in this case, it seems to be unbilled. I mentioned the tax centers for these varieties, right? I'm not going to go into the sales tax because it's going to ask us to try to set up one. And because there's not actually a company in that case, you'll be able to see. But the 1099s, notice it's saying something's not quite right. But if you wanted to play around with this, you could for this case. They actually want the tax ID. What I actually like for in this variety, assuming it won't actually show at the moment, is you'll have the ability to actually choose the 1099 payment right there. Because you're able to put in your contractors, they can actually submit their W-9s through here, and then you can do the NECs or the non-employee compensation for this variety. I mentioned the My Accountant. It's always featured right here. You can invite your CPA, you can invite us, depending on how many users you allow for that case for the admin access. And of course, the apps. So right now, let's see what their supposed apps are, I guess, probably because it's a fake company, it doesn't have one. But you can see the cases like QuickBooks Time, yes, which technically is its own app. There's a couple others I forgot to mention on here. There's QuickBooks Payments. You can actually set up QuickBooks Checking through here. With the payments, they can act as a merchant fee, and they'll tell you everything going on from swipes to keys to ACH, etc. But I told you not everything's rated always perfectly. Like in this case, apparently eBay Connector by QuickBooks is having a 2.5 out of 5. Okay, Shopify's got a smaller amount. Now you'll notice sometimes companies will have 2 different types of apps, and one may be rated higher than the others. So you can always look to see what is to the best of your benefit in this capacity. We talked about the reports, and if you wanted to see cases of the sales, right, we could pull up the customers. I mean, it's going to show you the invoices. Once again, you can do pretty much anything you'd like out of here. The one thing that is missing out of that would be the case of the spreadsheet sync, which is new. If you have advanced, when you go into settings here under tools, it's going to show up. In those cases, right, we don't have one at the moment, but I'll show you what it looks like within Excel. Okay. It's going to pop up here and it'll say sign in to Intuit. You'll sign in as usual, and the spreadsheet sync will pop up right here. Okay. And it'll ask you for what's going on with your company settings. Okay. It assigned me out again, but it'll be able to have the real-time analysis, what's going on with your company. You can go into pivot tables. You can batch edit the data right there. You can take the P&L and bring it straight into there. Okay. And it's only going to work with Excel in this case. They were saying just with Office 365. I did try it with my personal Excel as well on a Mac, and it actually worked and synchronized in. The one downfall, as I saw as a pro advisor, I was wondering for those cases where clients are asking me to look at their books through admin access, could I pull that data through here? I haven't been able to do that yet. I'm wondering if that's still because it's in its beta testing. That once again, I don't have full clarification on that, but if we had that capability, it certainly is going to work well. And as you can see, if we were bringing information in and we wanted to edit it, we could post it back to QuickBooks. So the connection's there. Okay. It's really just a different form of connections, but it's unique to advanced. And as we go further along, you and myself as a pro advisor, I'm going to have more fun actually operating with this to be able to see the benefits coming out of it, because data analytics has been one drawback that QuickBooks has dealt with, and this is their way of countering said limitation. Now, to go back to our slides, since we are basically here at 1 o'clock, we did have a few things we wanted to stress out there, and that was what's going on with our resources. So you can get certified as a pro advisor through Intuit, such as we have done. In that case, you do have to do annual certification. And as you get more and more advanced, you have standard QuickBooks Online, you have the QuickBooks Advanced, you got QuickBooks Payroll. Those are the 3 certifications available. I have all 3 set of certifications. And to renew said certifications, it is going to take more and more time each year in order to do so. But this is a YouTube free series. It's provided by Intuit. I think it's got about 100 videos built into it. And of course, you know, they have tied also with the FAQs. Now, Earl also provided this resource in regards to Pro Advisor. And Earl, if you wanted to talk about that briefly, be my guest.
Yes, Shawnette is one of the resources that we use to teach QuickBooks classes in a more in-depth manner. She's a pro advisor to the highest level. She's been nationally recognized for her abilities in QuickBooks. So she focuses solely on training small businesses on how to do QuickBooks. She has boot camps in 2 days and 4 hours, and you know, so whatever fits your bill, your need, your budget, she can probably provide it. So she's just an option for you.
Certainly. And you can also see who are the pro advisors that have made their public, you know, profiles actually available to be viewed by the public. But if you're ever interested in that as well, becoming one, you can do so for that variety. And to stress this at the end, of course, you know, if you have additional questions, you can meet with myself, you can meet with Earl, and we will do our best to diagnose that. Now, however, I do want to stress at the end of the day, we are not tax professionals. Therefore, if you can get a lot of these foundations done right, therefore, you'll find there's less and less that you're going to need to be concerned with, and you can focus more on the reports, because the reports are going to be reliable for that variety. And therefore, the information that you're going to use for your growth analysis of the business will also be in a better fit. But we're here as resources if you so choose. But if not, we will certainly understand. Nevertheless, we wanted to give you a top-level discussion of all things related to QuickBooks Online, and therefore, thank you for joining us on that capacity.
Hey Brent, there was one question
Shoot.
about a QuickBooks template.
Yes.
That you mentioned at the beginning of the slide deck, and I must not have caught that.
So there's several templates out there. QBO, what they do for the Excel templates, Intuit will provide ones if you want to work in Excel first and then import in. The one I specifically mentioned was something I customized for my clients. The ledger itself is not built to perfectly integrate with QuickBooks. It does great within Excel, but the customer database and the vendor database are set up with the appropriate fields. So if you did want to import those in, they would immediately see all the fields recognized, and it would actually apply that information correctly within QBO. But yes, also too, Intuit does have their own as well.
All right. I think that was all the questions. Thanks.
Sounds good. Well, for everyone who's here, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be asking for the survey feedback. Please submit said feedbacks. This way you can get a copy of today's presentations. We're going to remain on standby as you need. And also, too, if it's not an issue related to QuickBooks, every place in South Carolina, you're going to be able to find someone who can help from the SBDC. And yes, we do cross-collaborate on our consultations. Earl and I may be geographically separated, but we often tag team on quite a few clients because, once again, we're here to offer the best value we can to you and your business. So everyone, thank you so much again, and we hope you will join us for a future webinar.